Good Sabbath, everybody, and thank you for joining us. The services with the Eternal Church of God, for those people that are attending electronically, it's certainly nice to have you on board for today. The message today is perhaps not going to be something that's very pleasant for us to listen to, but I think it is something that is necessary. It's something that it can be helpful, should be helpful to us in steering our minds in the direction of where our efforts and our thoughts should be placed, as it seems that the country we live in, America, is heading downward in a spiral towards ultimately not becoming the great nation that it once was. And while there has always been a measure of dishonesty throughout the world and in America, we now live in a world where it is commonplace to have deception, corruption, dishonesty. It's business as usual, if you will. And so to call, for example, to call many articles that you might read in media outlets today news is almost absurd. Propaganda is a term that's used by many, and it's perhaps a better description of what is being pumped out by many quote-unquote media or news outlets today. And people say in many of these organizations that they are biased. They'll openly admit it, and they'll say things like, "So what?" And we see when this is the case, journalists will then become activists in promoting an agenda. And nearly everyone, it seems like, has some kind of agenda or is a part of some kind of agenda today. There's misuse of fact going on. There is intentional leaving out of necessary information, of facts and science, and yet they still claim that their rhetoric is science and fact-based. So the term, if you let me use this today, the term useful idiots was coined by the infamous dictator Joseph Stalin. And it is playing at work right now throughout the United States of America and throughout much of the West. More than half the country, I would say, actually falls into this category. And I'm not trying to be disrespectful. I truly am not. The term simply means that there are people that are being used to push forward a wicked agenda, and they are deceived. Many of these people have no idea that they're being used in this way. And so we are all deceived in some way. The book of Revelation tells us that that serpent of old, Satan, the devil, has deceived the whole world to one degree or another. And of course we read that and we like to think, except me. You know, I'm not deceived. Hey, I'm reading this. I understand what he's done, so it's not me. But we all have been deceived at some point in some time, and we all, I think, are deceived in some way, even unto this day. And that's part of the deception. So we see that deceit is something that is commonplace. It is common in politics. It is common in marketing. It is common in education and day-to-day business. Commerce, capitalism, if you will, has become almost entirely corrupt. So dishonesty has become a tool that politicians in the United States of America and around the world now use all the time, every day, multiple times throughout the day. And it has led to corruption, causing people to agree, nearly everyone agrees, that you can't trust every leader that's put in position of power in America today. You can't trust them. Some you can trust more than others, but not in every way. And people agree that something that's called fake news, a term coined by the last president of the United States, that this is a fact. And yet people still pick and choose what news, what they read, what they want to believe, regardless of the source. If it agrees with their own way of thinking, they'll agree. Yes, that's fact. That's science. And so it's a huge disappointment to all of us. To all of us. That we can no longer trust once big name news sources like CNN and NBC and Newsweek and NPR and others. You can't trust them anymore to tell you what is really going on. And sadly, few people actually have access to the whole truth anymore. I had read a couple of headlines yesterday when I was working on this sermon. One headline in a quote-unquote news source, a media agency, said 45 Senate Republicans join the fascist attack on America. As if it's true. They just want to put them in that category of being fascist, which is entirely not the truth. Another headline said, oil, gas, and coal are behind the far-right and white supremacist politics. So energy is behind white supremacy. You see how people are misusing things and twisting things and even making a lot of things up. So I felt it necessary to pay for a subscription to a media source, a news source, called the Epoch Times, just so that I would be able to read some news and some reports that are just going to tell the facts, just going to say it like it is. Now, this is a conservative news source, and they do have opinions in their articles, and I don't read all of those opinions, but they do have those, but they're stated as opinions. When it comes to telling the stories and the facts, they just tell it. They're not trying to swing it one way or the other. Now, I'm not trying to put a stamp of approval on the Epoch Times. I'm not encouraging people to go out and get a subscription to the Epoch Times unless you feel a need that or you want to be more informed about some things that are happening in the world. But being in the ministry, I felt I was responsible to find some kind of news source that was just going to state the facts, because we get a lot of questions and comments about many things through our website and people calling and sending emails. And I feel like I need to be able to address some of these comments and these questions and concerns and have a better understanding of some of these issues. But frankly, I don't enjoy it. I don't enjoy looking at the news and seeing what's going on around us. It is no fun at all, and it's quite depressing at times, actually. Disturbing, I should say, maybe is a better way to express it. But my point today is that deceit has become kind of like a sick form of art. People have gotten very, very good at this. They consider it, in fact, in many industries and in politics, it's considered a skill, a desirable quality, actually, to be able to deceive people. In big business, this is something they want so that it can benefit the corporation, or in our case, benefit the agenda of some people in government. And much like those people who are schooled in debate that are taught to argue both sides of an issue, even if they don't agree with one side, even if one side they know is wrong, there are people trained to argue the side that is wrong and to win that argument. Well, is that such a good thing? Is that such a good skill that we should have? Or does it fall in this category of manipulating the facts, of using deceit to win an argument? Either way, no matter which way you want to spin it. Isaiah chapter 59, Isaiah 59, I had spoken several times in the past about some of the wicked issues that have been presented and used, such as homosexuals, portraying themselves as happy people, gay they call it. It's deceitful, using the rainbow, God's creation, as a symbol of their deviance. But what most do not realize is that this marketing of evil, in this particular case, was not designed by homosexuals. They didn't make it up. It wasn't the suffragists that pushed forward the feminism in this country. It wasn't those people who love freedom who are pushing the pro-choice issue. They like to use those terms, pro-choice. I mean, who wouldn't want to be able to choose, the freedom to choose, right? But all of these issues were actually began by the devil. They really were. When you look at the issue behind the issue, it really relates to something that is wicked. Atheists in this example, and some of these examples here that I'm going to talk about today, who actually are socialists, and I talked about this recently, want to disrupt the biblical family structure. They want to disrupt the fabric that has made America a great nation, family, and God. And they want to do this so that a new world order can be implemented. A socialist, which really is just a communist world order. So dysfunctional families today are portrayed as being normal, and we told that, well, you know, everybody is dysfunctional in one way or another, so we should just celebrate it, embrace the dysfunctionality that we have going on in the world today. Instead of trying to be morally upright, just give in to it. Just let it slide. Celebrate it. Killing unborn babies today has been repackaged as something that's considered freedom of choice. They'll put it in the same category. If you go to get a hamburger, you want American, Swiss, pepper jack cheese on that? We all want to be able to choose what kind of cheese we want, so people should be able to choose if they want to kill their children or not. It's disgusting, and it's deceitful. The result has been an estimated 300 million babies killed since Roe versus Wade. Now, this number I don't think is a number that comes just from America alone, although America probably is about 1/5 of that, maybe more of that number. Politically correct jargon has simply become a way to whitewash deviance. And people think that they're being kind, that they're being loving towards others by adopting new ways to describe abnormal behavior or immoral behavior, I might say. But what they are doing is they are using this deception as a tactic to try to persuade people that evil is okay, that evil is something that is good. And so it isn't any wonder that America today is facing a rapid, steep decline of Western civilization. One person described it, I heard him describe it, and I think he said it in a good way. America is not just declining, it's falling. So I think most of us are not surprised at wrong turns that people are taking today. Mary, I think, said it last week. When we see things happening, it's actually almost not surprising anymore. Not shocking anymore, but it's very hard to watch, isn't it? Very hard to watch. I'd given a sermon a few months ago discussing the rise of socialism in America and in the West. And in that sermon, I related a lot of information that was provided by Curtis Bowers, who was a state representative, and he made a documentary film in 2010 called Agenda. And that film discussed many of the things that he discovered while being in office, what was happening. And he felt people need to know what's going on. So this man had insightfully discovered a communist agenda that was playing out right before our eyes, but people didn't see it. And today, even most people don't see it. It's happening in America, it's happening in many Western nations around the world, and most people are oblivious to it. And the reason is the issues, the tactics they are using, the issues are rarely the issue. That there is something else going on in the background. So the attacks on family structure, the attacks on content of the Bible, the attacks on the ethics that are found within the pages of the Bible, the attacks on a morally decent society that you and I have been a part of, have been able to experience from our youth, these attacks have been directly connected to a socialist agenda. And the point was made very well in that documentary. And I think I helped us to understand that by relating some of those points to you about a month or two ago. But I think something else that we see that many people don't, even some people that recognize the agenda don't recognize that even behind that is the devil. It's evil. It truly is. Well, there was a sequel to this documentary that was released a while back called Agenda 2, and it gave some more undeniable evidence in this regard, the spread of evil, how it's directly related to a socialist or communist agenda. And, you know, communism, people like to think that communism died long time ago with the Cold War, that it all died then. The communists in Russia, they just kind of faded away. They just kind of, melted into the woodwork and just became, just like us. That democracy just took over and everything's wonderful in that part of the world now. But that is not the case. That was never the case. Now, in this film, they explained that there was a big difference, and they related the comparison to the fall of Nazi Germany. Now, when Adolf Hitler's regime, when it was toppled, there were trials that were held by America and by Europe called the Nuremberg Trials. They wanted to hold certain people, politicians, certain military leaders responsible for the terrible atrocities that fascist, which really was just a communist regimes, had unleashed throughout Europe. And so they wanted to expose the heinous activity. They wanted some people to pay the price for the 17 million people that had died, that had suffered during the Holocaust. And a large percentage of those were Jews, and we're well aware of that fact. Now, on the other hand, or perhaps I should say along those same lines, when communism supposedly fell, there were no trials. Nothing took place. But communism is responsible for the death of an estimated 138 million people over the last century. That's almost 10 times the amount of the Holocaust. But nobody was held responsible for that. No trials when the Cold War supposedly ended. And so nobody was ever charged. No crimes against humanity was presented. Nobody prosecuted. We just kind of thought everything ended. It's all good now. The whole world is going towards democracy. But that was not the case. So today we have a supposed democratic Soviet Union. And if that's the case, why does the KGB still exist? How can it be that the current president of the Soviet Union or of Russia has remained president since the year 1999? More than 20 years he's remained in power in a supposed democratic nation. Why is Russia still invading countries around them and still trying to establish a Soviet empire throughout Europe if they're democratic? In fact, there has been a school of communism in Russia to this day that has about approximately 6,000 students at any given time. And this is no secret. They don't try to keep this a secret. I've seen images of some of these pro-communists in Russia. Nice-looking young adults and stuff brandishing the reaper and the sickle symbols on their jackets, like Letterman jackets, and on their scarves and on their headgear. This is alive and well in Europe, but it's not just in Europe. This documentary that I had watched explained that socialists have existed in Britain, in America, and in many countries since the early 1900s. And they have been hard at work pushing forward their agenda. Now, one expert said that the Cold War is going on right now. He said it's going on in the streets of Moscow, it's going on in the streets of Tehran, it's going on in the streets of America right now. And those who are viciously fighting for what you and I would perhaps put into the category of liberal values, those people who say that they are anti-fascists, Antifa, they are actually the fascists. They are the ones that are pushing forward this communist agenda. And they think they're on the right side of history, but again, the evidence shows that they are merely some of these useful idiots that Joseph Stalin called them. Most of these people do not even know exactly what they're doing. They think they're doing right and good, but they have no idea that it's all evil. It's evil that they're trying to force upon the people of America. Now, Isaiah, he had spoke about this sort of wickedness taking place among the people of Israel. Israel was a nation that had once known God, just as this country had once knew God. To a degree, I'm not saying they were right about everything, but principles based upon the Bible, biblical principles. But Israel rejected God's ethics, and their civilization declined to a point of total destruction. And so I want to read this, and I want us to consider how it fits with the path that America is heading down today. Isaiah 59, and beginning in verse 1. Behold, the Eternal's hand is not shortened that it cannot save, nor his ear heavy that it cannot hear. So I think this is a bit of encouragement to you and I, but he was also saying this to people that, now they're in trouble. Now they're facing destruction, and now they're going to reach out to God. Kind of like when the Twin Towers hit, right? All of a sudden, everybody's, God bless America. God help America. But, hey, where were you before? Why weren't you calling out to me earlier? And here's what the point God makes. But your iniquities have separated you from your God, and your sins have hidden his face from you, so that he will not hear. For your hands are defiled with blood, your fingers with iniquity. Your lips have spoken lies, your tongue has muttered perversity. Does any of that sound fitting to our country today? Your hands are defiled with blood. 300 million abortions. Your lips have spoken lies. Well, we see that every day, multiple times a day, even from people that are in positions of authority. Your tongue has muttered perversity. No one calls for justice, nor does any plead for truth. Is there anybody out there that really just wants to tell the whole truth? Well, very few. I think this is generally speaking. But in our case, we would see that it's similar. No one calls for justice, nor does any plead for truth. They trust in empty words and speak lies. They conceive evil and bring forth iniquity. Exactly what is happening today. They hatch viper's eggs. They weave the spider's web. And he who eats their eggs dies. And from that which is crushed, a viper breaks out. Their webs will not become garments, nor will they cover themselves with their works. Their works are the works of iniquity, and the act of violence is in their hands. Sounds all too familiar. Their feet run to do evil, and they make haste to shed innocent blood. Their thoughts are the thoughts of iniquity. Wasting and destruction are in their paths. The way of peace they have not known, and there is no justice in their ways. They have made themselves crooked paths, and whoever takes that way shall not know peace. And therefore, justice is far from us. Isaiah lamenting here, because they were his people. Nor does righteousness overtake us. We look for light, but there is darkness. For brightness, but we walk in blackness. We grope for the wall like the blind, and we grope as if we had no eyes. We stumble at noonday as at twilight. We are as dead men in desolate places. In other words, that's where it's heading. Complete destruction. We all growl like bears and moan sadly like doves. We look for justice, but there is none, for salvation, but it is far from us. Why? Because now it's time to suffer the consequences. God isn't going to let it slide forever. Eventually, it's time to pay the price of such degrees of evil. Verse 12, for our transgressions are multiplied before you, and our sins testify against us. For our transgressions are with us, and as for our iniquities, we know them. Yeah, I think a lot of people do know exactly what they're doing. They don't know exactly what's behind it all, such as Satan inspiring, because people have been conditioned to think that, well, God doesn't exist. And if God doesn't exist, well, then a devil doesn't exist. If a devil doesn't exist, well, there's no good, there's no bad, it's just all whatever. It's a free-for-all. But there is something in the human spirit that tells people, that's probably wrong. But what happens, it's called your conscience, but what happens is the conscience can be moved. The more you move it, the harder it is to get back on track. In verse 13, in transgressing and lying against the eternal and departing from our God, speaking oppression and revolt, conceiving and uttering from the heart words of falsehood. There you go. More and more common, conceiving and uttering from the heart words of falsehood. Justice is turned back, and righteousness stands afar off. For the truth is fallen in the street, and equity cannot enter. And so truth fails, and he who departs from evil makes himself a prey. Do we see that starting to take place? The truth fails now. And he who departs from evil, who wants to speak of truth, makes himself a prey, because the majority are becoming more and more evil. They don't want to hear the truth. They don't want to see people that are saying, no, that's wicked. We can't do that. You're going to become a target. So it is that we see so much of this happening in our country today on a more and more consistent basis, that it's becoming, like Mary said, hard to watch. I think it was a good way to describe it. And I like to focus on that because, frankly, I think we can let it get to us. It can really bring us down. But we shouldn't, because there is a great hope in all of this. I'm going to talk about that a bit later. So in this last documentary that I had watched, which is Agenda 2, Curtis Bowers explained how he had, since making the first film, Agenda, how he had traveled to different parts of the country, showing this documentary to different people in different areas, speaking in different forums at public meetings. And so many people were enlightened by it and were moved by it, and have since tried to help others and to help their own families and themselves from not getting caught up in some of these issues, which is ultimately the agenda. So Curtis Bowers proceeded to explain that there was one particular meeting where a gentleman had stood up to make a comment. Now, this gentleman proceeded to congratulate Curtis on his research, on the information that he had presented, and he did not deny any of it. He said it's all true. He then proceeded to say, I want to tell you something. I'm a professor at this college that they were holding the meeting at. He said he was a professor at that college. And he said, I am a communist, and we will win because we have your children. And then the man proceeded to leave the meeting. Now, this was very hard, even though I think Curtis was well aware of this already, and some others were. This was very hard for people in the meeting to hear. And there was a woman that was sitting in the front row of this meeting who was crying about this, upset, and she was wondering, how could this man, a professed communist, be a professor at our little community college here, teaching our children? And Curtis had responded to this woman and her concerns, and he said this. He said, ma'am, he is at every school in America. Doesn't matter if it's a college or grade school or a high school. People like that are at every school in America today. And this is a fact. And this is why young people we have seen in recent decades are increasingly evil, are increasingly ignorant as to the reality of their life's choices, the consequences that will have to be paid. And this is why we see that so many people, these people have grown up, because this has been going on since the 60s. This is nothing new. So many of these people have grown up. They're managing businesses now. They're head CEOs of corporations. They are in positions of government today. Students of people that were taught by, like this professor, a professed communist or socialist. He calls himself a communist, but it's really the same thing, is really it is. Communism is the end result of socialism. There's no denying that. So many people, we say, so many of our, well, I want to say young folk, but it's not just young folk, because these people have grown up. These people are my age now. And there's still, so many people are ignorant. They have no idea exactly what the principles of the founding fathers of a country laid, what they actually stood for, where they came from, and what they mean. They have no idea that the foundation of democracy in America is something that was exceptional and was extraordinary. And this is exactly why one president, and I think you know which one I'm talking about, why one president in recent years disrespectfully referred to the Constitution of the United States as that piece of paper. People tried to tell him, well, wait a minute, that's against the Constitution. He says, I know what that piece of paper says. Robert Mueller was a globalist who had been at the United Nations since its forming. He rose to become the Assistant Secretary of the United Nations, and he actually is the one who created what many of you might be familiar with, or at least be aware of by name, this World Core curriculum. He said, and I quote, that the goal of this curriculum was to promote growth of the group idea so that the group good and the group understanding and group interrelations and group goodwill will lead to group consciousness. We see where it's heading, this collectivism. It's socialism is what it is. And so this ideology that came from, actually from Mueller's mentor, and he openly admitted this, that Mueller's mentor was a Burmese gentleman that was once in the military in Burma, General U Thant. Now, Thant was a known communist supporter, but he was nonetheless, even though being a professed communist, was given the job as United Nations Secretary for 10 years, a communist in the United Nations. It's no secret. And Thant openly advocated world government. That's something that the United Nations has been pushing for a long time. World government. He actually openly praised the Soviet leader Vladimir Lenin, even approving of Lenin's tactics, saying that his goals were, and I quote, Lenin's goals were in line with the aims of the UN Charter. Robert Mueller, who created this World Core curriculum, followed in Thant's footsteps, and he said this. He said, UN Secretary General Thant, a former school headmaster from Burma, and my spiritual master, often said to me when I was his assistant, Robert, there will be no peace on earth if there is not a new education. And he was right. And so you see how this socialist agenda tries to say, hey, we're going to bring peace and equality to the entire planet. But it's a lie. It's fiction. It's a false narrative. So the World Core curriculum was soon adopted by public education in America, and many other countries followed the same curriculum. It's not only the liberal left that has been deceived by this world government, this collectivism that's been pushed in this narrative. Mueller's World Core curriculum was pushed forward by George Bush Sr. in 1989. It was renamed by Bill Clinton during his administration. It was called, and some of these names will sound familiar to some of you, it was called Goals 2000 by the Clinton administration. It was given a facelift by George Bush Jr., and it was called No Child Left Behind. That sounds great. It's a false narrative. And it was the driving force behind Barack Obama's Common Core. Some of you might be more aware of this Common Core initiative. And what they'll do is they'll incorporate things like a new way of doing math, a new way to look at science, but they'll also put in it things like, oh, you need to be accepting of all kinds of beliefs and all kinds of sexual preferences and all kinds of things. This group thinking, as Mueller had put it. And so this same agenda has deceived people on the left and the right, Republican and Democrat alike. They're all of us in some way, all of those people on the left and the right in some way. I shouldn't say us because, we don't we don't associate ourselves with any political party, but both people on the left and the right are deceived to one degree or the other, and they are all allowing this brainwashing, this reprogramming of America to take place and pushing it toward this collectivist mindset. Dr. Alan Keyes said something I think that was very interesting. He said this, he said, the end result is to make the people that come out of this type of education unfit to govern themselves. And this is it's the dumbing down of America. And we've known about that for a long time. There's been several books written on the subject. One of them is in the Church of God Library, the Eternal Church of God Library. If you're welcome to check it out, The Dumbing Down of America. So this is not only opening the door for wicked religions, we've seen it remove God from the schools. We've seen it remove God from any kind of public institution whatsoever, whether it be government or the courtroom or what have you. People don't no longer swear to tell the truth and the whole truth and nothing but the truth on a Bible. You haven't seen that happen in a long, long time. So it's convinced people, I think the majority of people, or perhaps it's not the majority, I don't have the exact numbers, but it just seems like it. Perhaps it's because the people that it's convinced are often more vocal and more hostile than the people that are not convinced, but it seems that it's convinced so many people that God doesn't exist, that he's oppressive, that God wants to take away your freedom, so we got to get rid of that bad old God of the Bible. And of course, if the God of the Bible doesn't exist, as I had said earlier, well, the devil doesn't exist either then. And then if neither one exists, well, there's no really definitions of good and evil, nothing really to follow anymore except what you want. Just do what you want. Freedom of choice. Kill your babies. You should be able to do that. Curtis Bauer said this. He said that the bottom line is our enemies are in control of the schools, and there is no fix. I know, he said, you don't want to hear that because I don't want to hear it, but it's true. They want our kids to be useful idiots. They want them to be dependent on the state, and that's the goal of the whole thing, he said. So they will repackage, rename, rebrand the same old thing over and over again. He said it is intentionally going downhill, and we have to grasp this. So what the narrative of education in America has been doing is deprogramming, or perhaps I should say reprogramming or programming people so that they don't really know who they are as Americans anymore. What is an American? One person I talked to said, I've never been so proud to be an American and not a Christian, as if they're two separate entities. But Americans have primarily always been Christians. Our laws in the Constitution are founded on Christian principles. But now people don't even know what being an American means anymore. They think it means the freedom to choose evil anytime I want. That's never, ever been the case. An ancient Chinese general by the name of Sun Tzu wrote this in his, some people call it a masterpiece of strategy. I haven't read the whole thing. It's not very long, actually, but it's called The Art of War. There's no reason, real need to read it, but he said something very interesting that was pointed out in the documentary. He said that if you know yourself, you will win the battle 50% of the time. If you know your enemy, you will win the battle 50% of the time. If you know yourself and you know your enemy, you will win the battle 100% of the time. So the reason I mentioned it, and the reason it was mentioned in the documentary, is because the problem that people are facing today is more and more people do not know who they are as Americans. We've programmed our kids to not really even know what it means to be an American anymore. So the battle is half won by the evil side. And on top of this, people don't even really know who the enemy is. Who is the enemy? They don't know, because there's these hidden agendas, these things going on, which is why it was pointed out the issue is rarely the issue. It's just a front. It's a false narrative that they have an agenda going on in the background. And so this means that if people don't know who they are and they don't know who the enemy is, it's an easy win. The battle's lost at that point. So along with removing God and removing biblical family values from this country, modern education has been redefining what it is to be an American. Blurring the lines, of course, but trying to redefine it. And so if you don't know true American history, and this was pointed out by Ardith when I talked to her before services, that her family or her daughter's children experienced this firsthand, bringing home what they had learned in history at school. And her daughter was like, that doesn't sound right. That's not American history. So she had to go to the library and get some books that were published some time ago and bring it and say, here's what American history is really like. Because people are being told today that the Founding Fathers were not good and decent people at all, that they were just evil, wicked slaveholders that had no real concern for the value of human life. That's what people are being taught in most schools today. And so is it any wonder why the left, in recent weeks, I've seen this in the news, in recent weeks, the left has been quoted as saying that they need to find ways to deprogram conservatives. Have you heard that? Well, now you know why. This has been the agenda for a long time. For the last few decades, we've seen Democrat-run unions attempt to rewrite history in the schools of America. We were well aware of this probably 10 years ago, where we saw that in many states they had these unions rewriting history books, taking God out of the history books, taking references to God out of the history books, and not portraying the founders of this country as really great men and women who did a lot of good for not just the country, but actually a lot of good for the entire world. That America has been exceptional and has done a lot of good for many other nations in helping to stop injustice all around the world. Contrary to this false narrative that is still playing out and is in fourth gear, really, the Founding Fathers of democracy in the West, they established laws that were to make all people to be considered respectful, that all life was to be respected. Now, those laws that were written by the Founding Fathers of America were not always rightly implemented. I'm not saying that at all, because some people will like to turn around and go, oh yeah, well look what they did to the Indians. And I'm not saying that our Founding Fathers did everything that was perfect. America's Founding Fathers, I should say. They did not. But they did a lot of good. More good than any nation that has ever existed in all of human history. And so the laws of this country that you and I have been privileged to be able to live in, they uphold the structure of family. They want to support family. They want to support patriarchy. They want to support the values of the church, meaning a Judeo-Christian ethic. They want to support that. And along with that, to support the laws of the state, because the laws of the state are supposed to be in line with those biblical family values, in line with the values of Christianity. And so nearly every attack on freedom today is aimed at one or more of these institutions. In fact, the Communist Manifesto states that its goal is to destroy the family, to destroy the church, and to destroy the state. And then, of course, to rebuild the state as the only institution that is important. Just the state. No family, no God, just the state. And this is why we have seen issue after issue after issue that has been pushing, transferring authority from the family, from the parents in the family, and from authority from the church, which frankly, is to come from the Bible, trying to transfer that authority, that moral authority, to the state. And I even read, and I mentioned it in the sermon when I talked about this the last time, the National Education Association of America, one of the teachers' unions, one of the biggest in the country, they state on their website that they feel that they should be providing quality education, they call it, to children starting at the age of 3 and 4. They want your kids, just after they learn how to walk, they want to start programming your kids, our kids. Let's go over to Romans 1. AOC and thousands of others in government today believe, and I think that most of them are deceived, but they still nonetheless believe that you can have democratic socialism without totalitarianism. That somehow it's just going to be beautiful and wonderful and peaceful and everybody's needs and desires will all be taken care of. There's a big problem with that. The problem is history. That this has been tried many times in the past, it has never, ever worked. Because when socialists come to power, human nature kicks in, and people don't step down from that power. They want to maintain that power, and what happens when people get power? They want more power. I want more of everything, right? So the whole collectivism, the whole groupthink mindset is actually based on a false narrative. It's something that is unrealistic, and even most socialists, I think, are deceived, and they can't see the evil behind their pipe dreams. So wickedness is moving forward today at a rapid pace. And the Apostle Paul described this kind of wickedness that has happened at times down through history, and I think is prophetic in these scriptures we're going to read here, beginning in verse 22. Saying this, let's go ahead and go to verse 20. For since the creation of the world, God's invisible attributes are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. So even scientists, and most honest scientists today, will look at the creation and say, this is a little too amazing just to explain away to evolution, and it just kind of sort of happened. It's kind of like that episode of Sherlock we were watching that one time where this lady brought in the tea for Sherlock, and he's like, are you the one that brings the tea? And she's like, who do you think's been bringing it all these years? He's like, I don't know, I think it just kind of happened. It's not the case. Somebody is behind putting that together. Somebody was behind building all of that so that they were without excuse. Because although they knew God, they did not glorify him as God, nor were they thankful, but became futile in their thoughts, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Professing to be wise, and pay attention because we've read this several times, but consider these words into what we see happening today. Professing to be wise, saying our opinions, our judgments are made upon science and fact. Professing to be wise, they became fools. They changed the glory of the incorruptible God into an image of a man, or made like a corruptible man, and birds and four-footed animals and creeping things. Now, Paul might be speaking specifically of idolatry here, but what do we see has happened when removing God? What did they put in its place? The creation. We got to save the planet. The creation is all wonderful and all special. And we should be, they tell people, you should be willing to sacrifice everything to save the creation. Therefore, God also gave them up to uncleanness and the lusts of their hearts, to dishonor their bodies among themselves, and this is referring directly to homosexuality, who exchanged the truth of God for the lie and worshiped and served the creation rather than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. So a person worships whatever it is they obey. So if they are going to serve the creation instead of the laws of the Creator, they're worshiping the creation. That doesn't mean they're bowing down on their hands and knees and praying to the trees or praying to a bird or to a mountain, to a lake or a stream. It just simply means they're serving the creation instead of serving God. And for this reason, God gave them up to vile passions. And this is him saying, hey, you want to go that path? Okay, you're on your own. Gave them up to vile passions, for even their women exchanged the natural use for what is against nature, again referring directly to homosexuality. Likewise, also the men, leaving the natural use of the woman, burned in their lust for one another, men with men committing what is shameful, and receiving in themselves the penalty of their error, which was due. In other words, it's going to come back and bite you. Oh, you want to do that? You want the freedom to choose evil? You can choose evil. It's going to come back and bite you. And even as they did not like to retain God in their knowledge, God gave them over to a debased mind to do those things which are not fitting, being filled with all unrighteousness, sexual immorality, wickedness, covetousness, maliciousness, full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, evil-mindedness. They are whisperers, or in other words, slanderers or gossiping, backbiters, haters of God, in other words, putting down the righteous, putting down those people that stand up for what is good. We see more and more of that today. Violent, proud, boasters, inventors of evil things, disobedient to parents. Why? Because the public education tells them, don't listen to your parents. What's important is what we teach you in the school, not what your parents try to teach you. And we've heard that firsthand come from many people, students that have come home and related to it. Here's what I learned in school. And their parents are like, whoa. Unforgiving, unmerciful, I skipped a few things. Undiscerning, untrustworthy, unloving, unforgiving, unmerciful. It goes on and on. We've read this several times. All of these characteristics are being displayed throughout this country and around the world today. And to be fair, to a degree, many of these characteristics have been displayed throughout history. But it's getting to a boiling point to where it's becoming more and more prevalent. We see it more and more in your face. It's being shoved down your throat today. Would you mind getting me a glass of water, please? That's okay. So the collectivism model is one where socialists believe that bringing in people of different religions or people of different cultures or backgrounds is a way to kind of level the playing field. And I even, once in a while, this is pretty rare, but once in a while I pop over to CNN just for a moment, just to see how bad the propaganda is getting. And so I did this yesterday, thank you. I did this yesterday and kind of briefed over one of the articles on their website, one of the ones that was featured. And it went on to explain, and this is regards to leveling the playing field, it went on to explain that at the end, the summary, I guess I should say, was we just need to give in to the new administration and what they want to do, to raise taxes and to create more median income. Level the playing field. That's what they're saying. We want to level the, because we want everybody to be equal. And it sounds nice, right? It's fiction. It's a false narrative is really what it is. Because once you try to create more of a middle class, the powers that be make that the lower class. And that's what socialism does. The end result of socialism is communism. So America has always been a nation that welcomes immigration or immigrants from other countries. But we welcome people who commit and desire to obeying the laws of this country. But something has drastically changed in migration over the last several decades, because people used to come to this country because they respected it. They saw America as a respectable country that was fair and just, and they wanted to be a part of the fabric of that society and to be productive and to do something that was valuable, to participate and do something positive in life. And so they admired this, but not any longer. We see the majority of people that are coming into the country that you and I live in now come for what they can get, not what they can contribute to. And they are shown, we show them, hey, you can break the laws. Just come in illegally. Come in, and we'll reward you for that. We'll give you money, we'll give you housing, we'll give you health care, we'll reward you for breaking the laws of this country. So why would anybody want to assimilate at that point? And then, of course, you see the leaders of the country breaking its own laws. They're just creating more and more of the same. Now, what many people don't realize is that it's not only the many people that want to come to America that have changed, that the attitudes have changed. It's also the powers that be that are allowing certain groups to come into not just this country, but into many Western nations. Something that was pointed out in the documentary, I found this very interesting. On September 11th of 2001, not long after the World Trade Center had come down and those thousands of people were murdered, something else happened in Nigeria. 9,000 people that were considered themselves to be Christians were ripped out of their homes and murdered. Why did that happen? Well, people saw this, oh, the Judeo-Christian America is coming down. It's time to do it. It's time to take care of those Christians. How many of us really heard about that? Now, we may have heard about it months, perhaps years later, we heard about that. We didn't hear it initially. Why? Why didn't we hear about that? Well, it's a part of the agenda. See, they don't want people to think that this is an attack on Christianity. They don't want that to get out, because then we might really be upset. People might really want to do something about it. See, the media has been working on this for a long, long time. There are people, key operatives in the media, many of them deceive themselves. They don't even know that they're a part or a tool of the agenda. And so they don't want to report the fact that there are attacks on biblical values, because it might get some people upset. They might get onto them to see what's really going on. Now, not long after that, there were many Muslims that were chosen to migrate into or relocate into various parts of the world and into America. We saw a lot of that happening in Europe. Now, it's not by mistake. It's not by mistake that Muslims are chosen to migrate into these parts of the world, because Islam, if you think about it, Islam is mandated to take over the world by force. Sounds like a comic book, but it's the truth. Now, many Muslims will say, oh, no, that's not the case. That, Islam is a peaceful religion, but that's not what their religious leaders say. That's not what is taught to their children in these Islamic countries. Islam doesn't believe in women's rights. Islam does not believe in personal freedom. They don't believe in a freedom of speech. If you speak against Islam, you should be jailed, tortured, or put to death. And that happens all around the world every day in these Islamic countries. In fact, I watched one incident was shown. I can't remember if it was in the documentary or not, but it talked about this family and how this man's brother was only 18 years old and did something minor, but it was against the teachings of Islam, supposedly. And so the government took him prisoner and took him away and said, we're going to reprogram him. And while he was in prison, his mom was calling, going, what's going on with my son? And they said, oh, he's doing fine, he's doing well, he'll be released soon. About 2 years later, when I think the boy had turned 18 at that point, they called the mom and said, your boy's dead. Come get his body. But if you want to get his body, you have to pay us for the bullets that we had to use to kill your son. And so she wasn't allowed to retrieve the body until she paid for the bullets that they used to kill her own son. This type of thing happens in Islamic countries. And yet we're told we should be accepting of this, that we should welcome that into our country. And we should allow things like Sharia law to exist in different parts of our communities. Well, the highest-ranking Soviet intelligence officer ever to defect to the West wrote that the anti-American Islamic terrorism had its roots, and I'm quoting this here, had its roots in a secret 1970s-era KGB plot to harm the United States and Israel by seeding Muslim countries with carefully targeted propaganda. Yuri Andropov, the KGB chief for 15 years before he became the Soviet premier, sent hundreds of agents and thousands of copies of propaganda literature to Muslim countries. And by 1972, Andropov's disinformation machinery was working around the clock to persuade the Islamic world that Israel and the United States intended to transform the rest of the world into a Zionist fiefdom. So you know what would happen if Muslims saw this literature, if they were convinced that this was the case, that they're going to try to take over the world, they're going to fight back anywhere and everywhere that they can, when there wasn't even really a war going on. So the Soviets, and the point that was made is that the Soviets, they saw an opportunity to establish armies of opponents against the West, against their main enemy. And I'm going to make this point in just a moment, which is the United States. Communists or socialists' main enemy right now is the United States. And I'll tell you why in just a few moments. Most of these terrorists that we've seen in recent decades think that they're killing people for Allah, but they have no idea, actually, that they're actually fighting for communism or socialism. In fact, it was the Soviets, some of us may know this, but the Soviets actually established and ran the PLO. You know what that is? The Palestinian Liberation Organization. They established it. Why would they want to do such a thing unless they wanted to use it? Several years ago, there was a Russian KGB agent who defected, and you may recognize the name. I remember the story when it happened. I didn't know everything that was going on in the background, but I remember Alexander Litvinenko. He defected, and soon after he defected was poisoned using some unique form of radiation because he began to talk publicly about Russia's connection to Islamic terrorism. Scotland Yard actually confirmed in 2015 that he was in fact murdered and that the murder was somehow connected to Russia, but no charges were ever filed. Now there's another issue that I want to talk about briefly because I think it's important. All of these are important for us to at least be aware of. And you'll see how this relates to us biblically. I hope you're seeing it, and I'll explain it in just a moment. But there is no doubt that mankind has been responsible for some disturbing changes in the environment, whether it be pollution or mining or what have you. There's been so many, chemical pesticides and fertilizers, and all of this have taken its toll, have done a lot of damage in the last 100 years. But the environmental issues that are being presented, again, are not really the issue that's being pushed, but it's been commandeered by the socialists. Nonetheless, many people have bought it, hook, line, and sinker, that we have to be ready to sacrifice everything, to give up everything in order to save the planet. But does the planet need saved? Isn't it us that need saved? Well, you and I know we're the ones that need saved. Mankind has not done a good job of tending and keeping the garden as God instructed Adam and Eve to do. But what does environmentalism really teach? I mean, the bottom line, I'm not talking about recycling. I'm not talking about refraining from using toxins on the food that we eat and about not using genetically modified organisms. Those things, I agree, they're all bad. We shouldn't be using those things, and we should be doing our part to take care of the earth that you and I live on. But what is the bottom line? What is the issue that many of these, or what is the issue behind the issue that is being pushed? Because when you look at it, what most environmentalists, and I'm not saying all of them, because, and again, so many people are deceived. I don't want to really point the finger of, oh, you're the bad guy, you're the bad guy, you're the bad guy. So many people are deceived in this, but what most environmentalists tend to believe is that there needs to be bigger government, more control, less personal freedom. that somebody needs to step in and take charge and take control of your personal freedom so that you don't have the choice. That's what they get at. That's really the bottom line. Now, interestingly, I found this very interesting, that the supposed last leader of communist Russia, the USSR, is Mikhail Gorbachev. I should know that name. I mean, I grew up hearing that name over and over again. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, but this man, after the Cold War supposedly ended, this man moved from Russia to San Francisco. And this man started an environmental organization in San Francisco. And he wrote a bunch of environmental laws that were then taken up by the United Nations. He wrote what was called, and some of you may have remember this name, Earth Charter's Commandments for a New Age. Now, one article I read talking about this charter said, who other than a communist icon would think he could claim the right to replace the 10 Commandments? Well, it kind of goes right in line with communism, right? The number one enemy is God. Get him out of the picture and then take out family or in the church. In any case, Gorbachev said this, and I'm quoting him, until now, we had the 10 Commandments. Now we have a new set of ecological commandments. It is a powerful document that will express a consensus toward common goals. And I saw a friendly picture of Gorbachev shaking hands with Barack Obama and Joe Biden, and they were all smiling ear to ear like, what a great thing is going on. This has become a major issue of the left, who say that there's nothing more important than to save the world, to get rid of fossil fuels. And so we see the new administration, as they came in, was some of the first things they did. Eliminate more than 11,000 jobs because it had to do with oil. Let's start destroying the economy right away. Does that sound like it's in the best interest of America? No. But it is in the best interest of what? An agenda, a socialist agenda. So they tell people that we must be willing to give up anything and everything in order to save the planet, that you have to be willing to give up religion, you have to be willing to give up family, your personal freedom in order to save the world. But again, it's a false narrative. You know, simply doing our part and doing what's right and respectfully treating the environment is one thing, but saying that you need to start giving up things in order to save the world, that's an entirely different story. Let's go to Jeremiah in chapter 6. Jeremiah 6. There is something I want to mention briefly, and that is the fact that there has been, and I don't have the full story on this, I've yet to be able to research it fully, but there has been an infiltration of many Christian churches, I'll say professing Christian churches. The collective values of socialism has actually infected a lot of Christian churches in this country and around the world. And we're aware of this. Think about this. Some professing Christian religions, or denominations, I should say, around the world, in this country, say that, and they actually have done this, that homosexual men and women should lead our congregations. That's happening today. The Bible talks directly against that. How could such a thing happen unless people are deceived? We see so many of them jumping on this environmental bandwagon of paying homage to Mother Earth, as they'll call it. In fact, this building that we and I are meeting in is a Presbyterian building. We're not meeting in their place where they have their services, but it's a side building here. Very nice people. I'm not saying that a lot of these people aren't, nice and decent people, but they're falling prey to this. And this is something I just noticed when we were setting up today. I found this in the back room over there, and I thought it was interesting because it kind of had something to do with the message today. little banner they have here. But you see how they have the rainbow and the earth and a heart, and then rays coming down on all these different colored peoples here. Peace forever, it says. And of course they have this, I don't know what that is, a platypus or something, and a dove. But do you see how this environmentalism is infecting the church, where the earth becomes all important and the values of God become less important? It's moving from spiritual to physical. And so that's what's being encroached upon in many of these denominations of Christianity today, moving from the spiritual to the physical. Manning Johnson, a former leader of the Communist Party USA, said this in 1953. He said that the communists discovered that the destruction of religion could proceed much faster through infiltration of the church. It was determined that with only small forces available, it would be necessary to concentrate communist agents in seminaries and divinity schools. These institutions would make it possible for a small communist minority to influence the ideology of future clergymen. The idea was to divert the emphasis from the spiritual to the material, he said. And what have we seen happen in recent decades? This health and wealth gospel, what's that all about? It's about the physical, isn't it? It's not about keeping the commandments, and it's not about being morally decent. It's like God just wants to bless you. He just wants to give you money and give you good health. Pay your money to me. Of course, who benefits from that? The people preaching that. They get all these offerings and tithes sent to them, and their health and their wealth just skyrockets. Meanwhile, other people begin to lose faith because they're not being blessed with health and wealth. Well, it's part of the agenda, isn't it? Take God out of the picture, right? That's what they want to do. We've seen it happen. In fact, I found this was interesting. A co-founder of the Communist Party USA, Benjamin Gitlau, he, along with his cohort, Dr. Harry Ward, he was also a member of the Communist Party USA, and along with a fellow Fabian socialist, Dr. Walter Rosenbusch, they started what is known today as an organization called the National Council of Churches. 3 communists started the National Council of Churches, a worldwide organization that's trying to unify the Christian denominations of the world and try to help one another. And it's no surprise that when you look at the details, the devil in the details, that the funding gone to this organization many times has gone to actually socialist movements, many of which have been responsible for terrorist acts against people that profess to be Christian. Wow. But most people don't see it. They don't realize what's happening. There's so much deceit going on in the world today. And it goes contrary to God's ethics, obviously, where we are to be a respectable people that do not have these diverse weights and measures, because those things are an abomination to God. And so some might think today, and they're deceived, but some might think, well, we can mix democracy with socialism, and it'll be great. It'll be good for everyone. But you can't do that. There's this principle found in the Bible of not mixing certain fabrics together and not planting certain seeds right next to one another, like one seed and then another one, different kind and then different kind, because they don't do well together. It'll be to the detriment of some of those plants and to the fabric that you're going to use. And God said, you can't do this. You can't mix socialism with Christianity. You can't mix socialism with democracy and expect it to work out. As I said in the first message I gave, none of these forms of government, none of them are going to work once they start abandoning the principles of the Bible. And so consider the decline of Israel and then of Judah and how wicked they had become in their treachery, as Jeremiah was lamenting this fact that his brethren, his fellow Israelites, were suffering and were going to suffer even more because of their wickedness. And see how something similar is happening in America today. Jeremiah 9. Jeremiah 9 and verse 1. Oh, that my head were waters, and my eyes a fountain of tears. Again, his lamentation here. That I might weep day and night for the slain of the daughter of my people. Oh, that I had in the wilderness a lodging place for travelers, that I might leave my people and go from them. For they are all adulterers, an assembly of treacherous men, and like their bow, they have bent their tongues for lies. They are not valiant for the truth on the earth, for they proceed from evil to evil, and they do not know me, says the Eternal. Everyone take heed to his neighbor, and do not trust any brother, for every brother will utterly supplant, or that is to try to take advantage of each other. And every neighbor will walk with slanderers. Everyone will deceive his neighbor and will not speak the truth. They have taught with their tongue to speak lies. They weary themselves to commit iniquity. In other words, they're very passionate about this, fervent, thinking that this is for the greater good to commit iniquity. Your dwelling place is in the midst of deceit, and through deceit they refuse to know me, says the Eternal. And therefore, thus says the Eternal of hosts. This is what is going to happen in this country and in many countries around the world. Behold, I will refine them and try them. For how shall I deal with the daughter of my people? Their tongue is an arrow shot out. It speaks deceit, and one speaks peaceably to his neighbor with his mouth, but in his heart he lies in wait. Shall I not punish them for these things? Are they just going to get off scot-free? No consequences? No. Shall I not avenge myself on such a nation? God will avenge himself on such evil. And America, like the people of Israel, knew God to a degree. Israel knew God to a degree. And the evils of a nation that refuses to know God will be avenged. And I hope the message helps us to understand that there is so much deceit going on in the world today that we shouldn't allow ourselves to get caught up in it. It's hard to watch. It's difficult, and it can weigh on our minds, but understand that the issue that might be presented is rarely actually the issue. There's much more to it, things going on in the background. And America is going downhill. Both left and the right. They are both corrupt. It's just a matter of one being more corrupt than the other. Isaiah 59, and we're going to end over there. End where we began. As I make one last point, and I apologize for going over, but there's one last point. The Church of God has known for more than 50 years that America as a significant force, a significant world power, America as a nation will eventually fall. This is actually referred to in the Bible as the time of Jacob's trouble. It is known because when it speaks about prophecies of the end time, when there are various world powers at play, that America is not a part of that. Why? Why would such a significant world military strength not be a part of that unless they are not strong any longer? So we understand this, and we now see how the power of America can be taken away from within. It doesn't necessarily need an invasion of forces from without, but that eventually, I think, will take place as well. So we can know, I think, by some of this information, why socialism, or should I say communism, needs America to be taken out as a military power. It needs America to be out of the picture. Because for several centuries, America has been a beacon of justice to the world. We have intervened where others refused to, stepped in and said, that's not right. we're going to do something about it. And we send people in and we do something that's positive and helpful so that people will not suffer and so that a nation will not fall. And so we have done this for a long, long time consistently, stepping in on behalf of others. And so communism, socialism, needs to take the moral and the military strength of America away so that when a beast power arises, it will not be challenged. And this point was made very clear to me when I heard a comment made by a New Zealand author, very bright man. He's a speaker, he's a documentary filmmaker, and also a political activist by the name of Trevor Loudon. He said this. He said, "This is the point that Americans need to comprehend. If America goes down economically, it will go down militarily. If America goes down militarily, we all go down. The free world is finished. It is finished, and it will be finished for a very, very long time." Who's going to stand up when a dictator arises in Europe? Who will say no? Won't be America. And so let's end where we began with Isaiah's prophecy that has an uncanny comparison to our time and what the Bible says is coming. Not only the retribution of the wicked, but I want to leave us with a positive note, because some will be protected. Some will be saved and will live through the tribulation. And some, hopefully some of us, will be chosen to be leaders of the true and righteous and just new world order that Christ will bring. And so what do we look to? We look to God to be our Savior. We look to the hope that is found in His way of life that truly will protect us. Isaiah 59 and verse 15. So truth fails, and he who departs from evil makes himself a prey. Then the Eternal saw it, and it displeased him, and there was no justice. And he saw that there was no man, and wondered, that is talking about no one wanting to stand up for justice, and he wondered that there was no intercessor. And therefore he sent his own arm. He brought salvation for him, and his own righteousness, and it sustained him. For he put on righteousness as a breastplate, and the helmet of salvation on his head. And he put on the garments of vengeance for clothing, and was clad with zeal as a cloak. And I think this is referring directly to Christ here. And according to their deeds, according to them, he will repay fury to his adversaries, recompense to his enemies. And the coastlands he will fully repay. And he's talking about the nations, the coastlands. And so shall they fear the name of the Eternal from the west, and his glory from the rising of the sun, when the enemy comes in like a flood. And then the Spirit of the Eternal will lift up a standard against him. And here's the hope. The Redeemer will come to Zion, and those who turn from transgression in Jacob, says the Eternal. So as for me, says the Eternal, this is my covenant with them. He's talking to us. My Spirit who is upon you, or should I say, my Spirit that is upon you. My words which I have put in your mouth shall not depart from your mouth, nor from the mouth of your descendants. We need to teach our children rightly. Nor from the mouth of your descendants, says the Eternal, from this time forevermore. And so this is what you and I look forward to, because the not too distant future may be very hard to watch, and it may be very difficult for us to experience. But beyond that, there's something great, even greater than what you and I have experienced, been able to experience in the once great country of America. Peace, happiness, prosperity, truly, for hundreds and eventually for millions and billions of people that will last for centuries and even for thousands of years to come.